York. Tim, stand up here. Yeah. Tim Finley from New York. Welcome, welcome.
Hey, we also have a brand new member that just signed up today. This gentleman right here just signed up at 10 kids.
And before we go any further, the prize for the best dressed shipmate today goes to Bob. Coat and tie. Good.
Somebody's got to do it.
All right. I got a little sea story to tell you. My next door neighbor, he's passed away 10 years ago, rest his soul. He was a retired first class signalman. Great big guy, bronze god from the, oh, not signalman here? Okay. You'll appreciate this. Nothing but destroyers and cruisers. Signalmen, hard to get ashore, right? Hard to get ashore. So a whole career, 24 years in the Navy as a seagoing signalman, destroyers and cruisers. The entire time he was aboard, what, 4 destroyers, 2 cruisers? Never once went below into the spaces. Never once. Show of hands, how many have never been below? Ah, signalman. All right. This is for you. This is for you. I'm about to show you what it was like on a destroyer, and I'm going to be focusing, like most of us were. I was on a 1,200 pound destroyer, but for you 600-pound destroyers, you'll see. All right. Whole Snipes, bringing the heat and turning the screws. Destroyer Engineering Department, for those of you who don't know it, I found this very convenient little plaque online. Starting at the top, the 12 o'clock position, hull tech. And let's go to the right, machinist mate, IC electrician, IC man. Coming down, engineman, electrician. Coming up here to the machinery repairman. And here's something, how many of you have served on a gas turbine ship? All right, nobody knows that here. Gas turbine tech. That's what is aboard. Those are the Snipes of the Arleigh Burkes. The Snipes of the Arleigh Burkes and the few Ticonderoga class cruisers that remain. And
one in the middle.
hey, hull tech. Damage controlman. Damage controlman. Right. There's your hull tech there. All right, but what's right in the middle? How many BTs in here? 1 BT, 2 BTs. All right. Boiler technician, boilerman, boiler tender. All right. So before we go much further, this is my ship. I was chief engineer on USS Kirk from 1973 to 1975. Just to give you an idea of what percentage of their crew is in the engineering department. We had a crew of 275, and we had 88 men. It was only men at the time, only men. So we had 88 men in the crew, in the engineering department. So you can see it's the largest department as far as personnel. There's my ship crashing through. What I have here is my chief BT. For you BTs, this is a air-conditioned console booth. Right? How many of those did you have? What ship are you on?
I was born on the Somerset and John Paul Jones.
Okay, good. Okay,
and
good.
also on carrier.
Uh-huh.
So we had the air conditioning.
Okay, so, yeah. Anyway, air conditioning. That's my chief BT, Chief Gornto, and a third class BT who should have been a second. He made it. What you have down here is, this is the machinist mates from the engine room, getting a little bit of air. Getting a little bit of air. This is the chief machinist mate. This is my main propulsion assistant here. Right here, coming out of the bilge, this is our Coast Guard, officer. We had a Coast Guard exchange officer who I have to say was the best officer we had, best junior officer we had on the ship. Crackerjack. Coast Guard really picked the right guy for that. This is my commanding officer. That's me in the back. What this was for, we were getting ready to go through a propulsion examining board, and I was having trouble getting morale, not morale so much as cooperation in the fire room into the bilges. So the captain challenged me, the captain chose the Coast Guard officer to challenge me and the main propulsion assistant to clean the bilges. So that's what we're doing. We're in coveralls. That's the captain coming up out of the bilge. Yeah, it worked great. We just did a little section of it, but we kind of shamed him into doing it. It was great. This is our engineering department. My damage control assistant here, Steve Wesco. My main propulsion assistant here, John Pine, and the skinny guy with the hair in the middle is me. Long ago. All right, that's my shift. All right, what are we talking about? Hole snipes. There are snipes and there are snipes. All right. Hole snipes we're talking about is boiler technicians, and you can see back during the Second World War, they were water tenders. Was a water tender, then became boiler tender, then a boiler man, and then boiler technician. It kind of cycled it through its the titles. And you also had machinist mates. You had a fresh air machinist mate, A-gang. Fresh air machinist mate were the guys who took care of the anchor windlass, steering gear, air conditioning and refrigeration, HV and LP air compressors, everything that wasn't in the hole, although some of the machinery was in the hole and they had to kind of go down there and do it.
The evaporators too. The evaporators too.
No, I'm not fresh air guys.
I know, machinist mate.
I know, we're talking about fresh air machinist mates now, yeah. And the other guys are the engine room machinist mates. Those really are the ones we're talking about here. Now, well, I got to quit fiddling with this thing. All right. So that's who we're talking about, the hole snipes. Remember, these guys they're like umbilically attached together. They're BTs cannot do their job without machinist mates. Machinist mates can't do their job without the BTs. Machinist mates need your steam. Machinist mates need the steam from the boilers. But the BTs need the water from the machinist mates. All right, so it's symbiotic, is that the right? All right. Here are the early days, back before oil, coal-fired ships. You had two. You see, they're shoveling coal into the boilers here. So you had firemen who shoveled coal into the boilers, and you had these poor guys, coal passers. Their job was to shovel coal out of the bunkers onto the boiler flats, so that the firemen could then shovel it into the furnaces. And what did that produce? The black gang. Nothing racial about this. This is black gang because when you're down in a hole, it was black dust all over the place, black coal dust. All right, you're mess decks master at arms. You let these guys into the chow line? All right. Okay, let's go into the fire room here. What we're dealing with, what the BTs are dealing with is this thing. This is the FRAM, the 692, 710 class gearing and Sunder class boilers, same boilers. They're called an M-type boiler. They take a lot of guys to operate this thing. There are no automatic controls at all, except for those who had the single element. That doesn't matter. A lot of guys. Ruler of the pit. This man, if you ever run into a Master Chief BT, bow down, bow down.
He never got rode up, huh?
Huh?
He never got rode up.
Yeah, gold, yeah. Or he never got caught.
Yeah.
Never got caught, yeah. Okay, the M-type boiler is a standard 600-pound boiler in tin cans of the World War II era. Fletcher Gearing and Sumner all use the same plant. Plus battleships and cruisers use the same plant. So it's very common. You could go from that's why people say, oh, if you're not a tin can sailor, you don't. Well, a lot of tin can sailors during the Second World War served on both cruisers and destroyers. It was because of the boilers, because of the machinery. It was the same thing. Okay, there are 4 of these. A twin screwed, and I'm going to be referring to the FRAMs, the gearing and the Sumner. There are 4 of these. 2 in the forward boiler room, the fire room, 2 in the after fire room. All right. So who's down there? Top watch is in charge. There's a top watch in each plant. It's either going to be a chief, a first class, or a really squared away second class. You can see this is an old painting, World War II. For those of you who think that's a E6 and below, it's not. It's chief. Look at his hat. Back during the war, they actually wore dungarees. The only thing that set a chief apart from when he's in his working uniform is the hat that he wore and a khaki belt that he wore. That's what set him apart, and that's what you see here. He's the chief of the watch. Here's a Berneman. Here's a guy on sound power phones. In this case here is a first class BT. Notice what he's sitting under. He's a first class. So he's sitting right under the ventilation duct. And all you got, you. All right, now, this is not an air-conditioned booth, but they do have automatic controls, and this is probably on, oh, my God, keep doing this. Okay, there's the top watch. These are automatic controls on the Charles F. Adams and the Forrest Sherman class, 1,200-pound plants. Okay, down in the hole, you got Berneman, right? You have basically there are 2 watches. You got to create fire, and you got to control the level of the water in the boilers. That's basically what you're doing in the fire room. You're creating heat, and you're maintaining the boiler water level. These are Berneman. When you're at general quarters, you'll have 2 Berneman on each boiler front. If you have 4 boilers on the line, or if you're at GQ, you got 4 Berneman down there. Right. You're steaming 1 boiler, like in a cruise. You're in a cruising situation where you're just, you'll have maybe 2, but maybe 1. Maybe 1. BTs were always shorthanded. Always. Always. It's because many of the BTs were always in the sick call line. And you have checkmen. This is very important on this class of ship because there were no automatic feed water controls, where later on in a 1,200-pound plant, automatic. So this was one of the most critical jobs in the plant was the checkman. Even though it's a young man here, both of them are young men. The very worst thing you could have is water out of sight low on a boiler. You get water out of sight low on a boiler, and you're running the risk of burning the tubes up and losing that boiler permanently. So they have to maintain, and he's looking at, this is a sight glass here, he's actually looking at the level of water that's inside that boiler. And as you can see, it's hotter than hell. Hot air rises, heat rises, right? Law of physics, heat rises. So the hottest spot in a fire room is up near the overhead, and that's where he is. He's up at the top. He's right at the steam drum, top of the boiler. That's a checkman. Now there are others. You've got messengers of the watch. You've got guys who are under instruction, because everything that's in a fire room or later on in an engine room is operated by auxiliary machinery. Here you've got fuel oil service pumps. You've got fuel oil booster pumps. You have fuel oil heaters. So you have what sometimes are referred to as pumpmen. And so, but these are the 2 basic. Those were the 2 basic watches, Berneman and checkman. All right, all right, you guys who have your stove at home, where you click, 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 and the stove starts. Nah, doesn't do it that way. It's a tiki torch. It's with Frankenstein movies where they're marching with the torches. That's what you see in the fire room. This is lighting off a boiler.
Fire in a hole.
Fire in a hole. Yep. And you can see earlier guys. He's just in his shirt, a cigarette. Got to have that cigarette, and he's getting ready to light off. Later on, we're more concerned about safety and all that. And you can see he's in a leather. What he's wearing here is a leather welder's coat. Also the face mask, but this is the old-fashioned way. This is after they started getting worried about your health. Yes, sir.
Don't forget the Zippo lighter.
Oh. I'm going to tell you a sea story now. I was the main propulsion assistant on the Incheon, LPH-12. Brand new ship. I'm a plank owner. I was the MPA, main propulsion assistant, owns M division and B division. We were underway the first time, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning. We were supposed to light off. By the way, gas turbine guys, they just hit the button and they go. We're lighting off. It's 2 o'clock in the morning, and everyone was down there. It was a big deal. So I was the chief engineer wasn't there. Main propulsion, me, the master chief, the chief, everybody. They're all in the firing aisle, and our chief engineer was an LDO who was a stickler for on time. Everything's on time. So as the clock ticked to 2 o'clock, the Burneman is going like this. And he goes like that. Next guy is going like this. Next guy's going like this. Nobody had a Zippo lighter. Nobody. And it's about 2 minutes of 2 in the morning. Holy crap. So we're sending the messenger to run up to the mess decks, try to find somebody who had a light. We finally did. Finally found somebody, but we got lit off about 10 minutes late. And I thought, well, that's close enough. No, not with this chief engineer. About a week later, we're underway, and he's sitting in the log room reviewing the logs, and he says, Doyle, come here. So I went over, yes, sir. He said, what's this? Because he's got the light off sheet, 0205 or whatever the heck it was. I said, well, I told him the truth. So stupid. I told him the truth. Nobody had a light, and he looked at me like this. What do you mean nobody had a light? He took the entire fire room crew, me included as an MPA, marched us up to the ship store. And we had each of us stand in line, and we bought a Zippo lighter. And every time he would see us, I mean, for months and months later, you're out in the middle of the hangar deck and walk along, he see a BT coming, he says, put his hand out, and BT would slap the lighter in his hand. Yeah.
You mean none of them smoke?
Yeah, but nobody had a light. Everybody smoked, but nobody had a light. It was one of those, it was, the planets were in alignment in the wrong way. Yeah.
2 a.m.
Yeah.
The one time I went to the engine room, I was in undressed blues, I was the messenger of the watch, and I was sent down to get a can of red oil and a green oil for the running lights. I spent about 45 minutes, and I never found them. I got up and got chewed out by the officer of the deck to where the hell I'd been. Right? And I just wonder, where do you store the red and the green?
There's a special locker for it. You just didn't have the keys for it, that's all.
In the paper.
Yeah.
Right up in the steam.
Okay, so that's lighting off. All right, let's move over to the engine room. Basically in the engine room, you've got the main engine, generator, and evaporators. So basically the same in both of the forward and after engine rooms.
Get a lot more than that.
Oh yeah, a lot more than that. Sure, I'm talking about watch standards now. Yeah, you got a lot more than that. You're not kidding. You got main feed pumps. You got the DFT. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. 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 Oh yeah. Lower level. Well, you're going to see some pictures here in a minute. Okay. This is what you have in the engine rooms, and what I've shown you is the machinist mates from third class all the way to master chief there. All right. Now this is the cutaway of the. That's why I have this. This is the cutaway of the main engine. These are turbines. You have a high pressure turbine, low pressure turbine, and they're driving the reduction gears. You've heard reduction gears. Okay, they're driving the reduction gears. So I just want, now this is all opened up. We did an autopsy here, but they're all opened up. They're obviously closed in. The turbines and reduction gears would fit in the space from here to that wall, about. A little closer. All right. Engine room operations. The main control is one of the engine rooms. So forward engine room will be main control. This is the engineering officer of the watch. I don't know what ship this is. This is the throttleman here. This I don't know. I don't know what it's obviously she. Yeah. So it's a. There are very few there are very few boiler steam-driven ships left in the Navy. Very few, and they're the big ones. There are no destroyers are steam-driven anymore. So, so the engineering officer of the watch would be on a destroyer would be in the forward engine room. Each of the engine rooms would have a machinist mate of the watch. Now, I chose this one because you can see the throttle board, and this is the throttleman. He's keeping, when you get a bell, you know, when you call a bell down, you want to go up in turns. That's his bell sheet there. I'm assuming, because he looks like he's bewildered, I'm assuming he's the machinist mate of the watch. No, I love him. Don't. All right. But then you've got the throttleman. Throttleman here, by the way, EMO2. Any of you guys remember that? That was that's the after engine room. Engineering 02. EMO1 would be the forward engine room. Evaporators, Griscom Russell solo shell evaporator, and ship service turbine generators. These are the three basic watches, but you have pumpmen, you've got messenger of the watch, you've got guys under instruction, all that. All right, remember these guys? Yeah. This was what? Turn of the century, turn of the last century. What, 125 years ago? So you don't see that anymore, right? You don't see that anymore. Yeah, I think you do. Okay, boiler firesides. All right, I can't see a thumbs up from the BT back here. All these pictures are, except for that one, all these pictures are inside the boiler. Every 600 hours, was it? 600 hours for firesides. Every 600 hours of steaming the boiler, you had to shut it down, isolate it, cool it off, open it up, and get inside and do that, clean it. Particularly true when you were burning Navy Special Fuel Oil, NSFO, which was a combination of residual fuel and distillate fuel. Believe it or not, when the Navy went to straight distillate fuel, the hours for firesides were greatly extended, which was great. But what you're doing is you're cleaning off soot and in some cases rust. Now, we talked about asbestos earlier with the VA fella. There's a ton of asbestos inside the boiler. Boilers, the refractory, what they call refractory, boiler brick, boiler block, corbels, the castable refractory you use on the to insulate the inside of a boiler is all asbestos, all of it. And you have when you're cutting blocks, you've got a saw set up, and you're cutting them, and you're flying asbestos dust all over the fire room. Just terrible. Every BT either has asbestosis or he's gone, one or the other. Anyway, so this is, as you can see, it's a dirty job. These guys have just come out of the boiler, as you can see. So it could have been them. Look at the faces. These guys are probably 1910, 1905. These guys, 1975. Right? Same guys. All right, that's firesides. You also have what's called watersides. Watersides is the inside of the boiler. Firesides is the outside of the tubes where you scrape them and clean them. By the way, you go all the way to the top of the stack when you do that. You don't just do the boiler, it's all the way up the stack. Watersides, which is not done as often, but my opinion, it's worse than firesides. I don't know how you feel. Watersides is punching tubes. This man, you can see he's laying in the steam drum, laying there on his back. His buddies took his picture. All the stuff that's in the steam drum, you can see here. All this stuff, cyclone separators and all the piping, all has to be removed before you can get access to the tubes themselves. And they send a rotary brush all the way down to the bottom. So when you non-BT or non-machinist mates, or non-BTs rather, hear them talking about punching tubes, this is what they're doing. They're cleaning, and it's rust. They're cleaning rust. Where firesides is soot and asbestos, here it's rust, just blooming rust all over the place. And you can see he's got a mask on because he's required to wear it. He's required. But look where he's wearing it. Can't tell these guys. I'll wear my damn mask, but I'll wear it the way I want to. This man is crawling out of the steam drum. You tell it's a steam drum because here's the gauge glass for this. He's crawling out. That's the size of the manhole. So that's why I used to be able to get inside the steam drum. Not now. You always have the little guys in. And you're always going to have one guy who is not in any way claustrophobic. He loves it. And that's probably what this guy is. Anyway, boiler water size. Yes, sir.
Chief engineer had to go inside the water, the dry side,
Yeah,
the wet side, rather,
yeah.
in order to certify that all the tubes had been punched.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a very good point that Ray makes. An officer has got to, now you know, the enlisted crew does all the work. The officer's got to certify it and say it's done correctly. So.
Climbing through that hole, you had to put one hand in first and bring the other one
Yeah,
in
yeah,
after you, because
yeah.
it was just barely big enough
Yeah.
for a human.
I have another sea story about that, but it's engine room sea story, so I'll get to that one. Okay, so that's yes, sir.
I used to hear, I can recall hearing that, they'd make an announcement that they were blowing tubes.
Oh.
What is that?
Okay, oh, good point. That's an operational thing underway when a boiler's lit off. Depending on what, now, when you were burning black oil, you blew tubes every 4 hours. Every 4 hours.
Made a mess of the deck.
Oh yeah, well, it depends. If you can maneuver the ship properly and get the proper wind, it takes all that crap and takes it over the side. If you can't, then yeah, all that very fluffy black soot will filter right down on everything. But blowing tubes, that's where when the boiler is operating, there are tubes that have holes cut in them, and steam is blown through them. It's 350 psi, something like that, and it sweeps the soot off the boiler tubes, and there are a whole bunch of them. And there's a sequence where you sweep from the bottom to the top, and that once every 4 hours you did it. But once your Navy went to distillate fuel, you had very much less soot, and so you didn't quite do it as often. I forget what the period is. Yes, sir.
You could hear them do that at the power plant. When
Oh.
it first opened,
Yeah.
you could hear it everywhere
Right.
when they blew the tubes
Sure, 'cause
over there.
it's steam, you're
Because the
blowing-
safety valve lets go and it's pretty long.
Yeah. By the way, that's one of the biggest losses of feed water. You know, when you machinist mates,
Yeah.
what are you doing with all the damn water? Well, one of the things you're doing with them is you're blowing it off the stack. Because once every 4 hours, you're using that steam to blow the soot off the tubes. The reason you're doing that is heat transfer. The more soot you have on a tube, the less heat is transferred. So you got to have as minimal amount of soot. So anyway, so that's boiler water size. Let's get over to the engine room now. Oh, fire size. I don't have any great pictures of guys slipping and sliding and doing all that. However, this is the main engine, the main condenser. Remember I talked about the main engine? Underneath the reduction gears, not the turbines, but underneath the reduction gears is a sump. Those of you who are used to changing your oil in your car and you've got 5 quarts of Pennzoil or whatever, 5 quarts, right? The sump on this plant is 1,200 gallons. It's a big, lot of oil in these things. And here, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's talk about the main condenser first, and I'll get to the main. Okay, what you have here is a huge, this little thing here, this is the end, the bell here. These are tubes. You have seawater, cold seawater comes in, through the tubes, a single pass, and goes out. You have steam from the low pressure turbine, exhaust steam. You no longer is enough pressure there to work. You want to recover it back into feed water, condensate then to feed water, and it goes into this huge condenser. Now they're big. The main condenser would fit into the corner of this room. They're big. And by the way, when somebody buys a ship to break it up, that's what they're going after, because there's no ferrous metal in it at all. It's all non-ferrous metal. Manganese, bronze, copper, nickel, all that. Very valuable. But what happens here? You got it, by the way, this scoop injection here is about this big, about 24, 28 inches across. And what you're doing as the ship goes through the water, you're scooping water into this main condenser, goes through and back over the side. What comes with that? Look, logs and all that, but what really comes is biological matter, fish. Every once in a while when you can't maintain vacuum and you start making or particularly in the vents, if you see little bits, particles of fish coming out of your vents, you know you got a problem. And this is where all the BTs start laughing at the machinist mates. That's where the BTs laugh at the machinist mates, because you got to go in here, and sometimes you have to, because this is open to the sea. We've actually had divers come over and put a cofferdam on the bottom, because you've got only one valve. This is it here. There's one valve on either side, so it's hard to isolate because you got to put people inside that. This is big enough to get someone inside in a crouch, about like this. And you clean it out. And guess what it smells like?
Shit.
Oh, God. Because there's no telling what's in it, particularly if you've been up the East River in New York.
Oh, yeah.
No telling. All right, so that's the machinist mate dirty job. And now I jumped ahead of myself, but now we're going to get to the main engine lube oil sump. I want to talk about how big this main engine is. Now, this is much bigger than a destroyer one, but this is what the bull gear looks like. Right? The bull gear is this one right here, second reduction gear. Turbines are over here, driving this pinion, which drives those gears, which drives these pinions, which drives the bull gear. Anyway, that's the bull gear. Bull gear, and here's my sea story. I was a chief engineer, and chief engineer has got to certify, he's got to be the last man out of the sump. After it's been cleaned, last man out of the sump. And these guys left about 1.5 inches or 2 inches of oil in the bottom of the sump. And I had to shimmy in there. And I looked like I'd been basted, getting ready for rotisserie, keeping their composure. They thought it was funnier than hell. Anyway, that's a dirty job for machinist mate.
And you had to go in your underwear.
Yes? I'm sorry, you what?
You had to go in your underwear, and that was it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And everything that goes in or out, whether it's a boiler or a condenser, main engine, lube oil sump, inventoried. You cannot leave anything in there. If you left the flashlight in there and it gets picked up and flipped, because this gear, when you slide in there, imagine I'm laying on my back, that gear is right here. You can slide underneath the gear either way. So anything that's in that oil, and you've got a big sump, anything that's in that oil will get flipped up into that gear. So very important that you take inventory control is important. Yeah, not just in the supply department. All right, now I'm going to read something to you. Take me less than a minute. Candy wrappers, boondockers, orange peels, ladies' spike heel shoes, empty grease gun, light bulbs, wrenches, rags, chewing gum, crescent wrench, cigarette butts, whiskey bottles, chipping hammer, ball caps, Coke cans, pens and pencils, eyeglasses, peanut shells, empty tin cans, pneumatic drill, a 42D brassiere, $10 bill, torn skivvy shirt, foxtail and dustpan, wire brush, banana peel, empty skull can, loose change, buck knife, apple core, white hats, comic books, broken grinding wheels, cigarette butts, popcorn boxes, roach clips, paint brushes, bayonet, watermelon rinds, wristwatch, tape measure, Vienna sausage can, broken thermometer, coffee mug, ratchet wrench, etc., etc. What's common to all that? Miscellaneous junk that finds its way to the bilges. And I can remember every single one of those being in one of the many bilges I've been into. And what causes that? The immutable law of gravity. If you drop it, it's going to end up in the bilge. And guess what? You leave it there, oh, I'll get that later. I'll get that later. Then when you go in there, you're getting it later. So how do you do that? Bilge diving. All right. There are only 4, I think. I can't think of any other space on the ship that has a bilge except for fire rooms and engine rooms. So getting anything out of the bilge, cleaning the bilge, painting the bilge requires you to get into the bilge. This one just looks like machinery, but it's not. There's a guy right there. It's his head, got it right there. All right, so you can see all these guys are in the bilge port, and this is a petty officer, so he's down there inspecting the bilge. All these guys have just finished. Now, rank has this privilege. Obviously just out of the bilge. Look at his hands. Obviously just out of the bilge. Obviously just out of the bilge. Not. He's a second-class petty officer if you look real close. MM2 has got his boys in the bilge. But I can guarantee you that MM2, when he was MMFA or MMFN, he was down there too.
Did you guys have pipe tunnels?
No?
On the ship I was on, it was the tender. The bilges and a pipe tunnel.
Oh, you had a double bottom.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, destroyers don't have double bottoms. You're right there at the sea.
I had 3 months of that.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, this is the bottom of the ship. This is on the other side of that 3/8 or 5/8 of an inch, the seawater. Yeah, yeah, but larger ships have double bottoms. Many ships, the battleship, for example, Massachusetts, a lot of the fuel is in double bottom below the bilge. Yeah. All right, now this is my last slide. I found this online. I don't know who these guys are, but I can remember guys just like this. Paul, Glenn, Dean, and Brad. Paul, Glenn, Dean, and Brad, 4 amigos. Whole Snipes, back, this is my impression of this picture. Whole Snipes, back aboard after a successful liberty. In the pit or on the beach, true shipmates. Notice here, I can't tell what these guys are, but fireman, petty officer in charge of the Liberty Party, 3rd class machinist mate, MM3 Dean, whoever Dean is. But somebody actually typed this. I picked this off the internet, believe it or not. Somebody typed the names on there. Petty officer in charge of the Liberty Party got his fellow Whole Snipes back aboard in one piece, and that's important. Somewhat the worse for wear, but ready to turn to. All right.
It could have been too, going from being a polywog to a shellback.
Sure, could have been that. Could have been anything. I have no idea. There's no. But these guys posed for this picture. They're proud of it. Whatever they did the night before, or the hour before, and they're obviously in their compartments. So they did this on the beach, unless they, yeah. And being a petty officer, you're not. He's been around for at least a year, maybe. Anyway, any questions at all? Yes, sir.
Real quick, you mentioned something about most ships on steam powered now.
Right.
But aren't nuclear vessels all steam powered?
Very good point. Good point. Bob brings up a good point. All nuclear powered vessels are steam powered, except they are the boiler. The kettle is a reactor, not a boiler. Yeah, but you're exactly right. Let me go back here. This part of the plant, exactly the same. Turbines, reduction gears. So nuclear carriers, the machinist mate's job, although a nuke machinist mate has got to be a graduate of the nuclear power school, but they're operating the same machinery. Different on the boiling side of it. You know, the reactor operators are kind of the modern day BTs. So tell them that next time you see them. Okay, any good question? Yes, sir.
You know the temperature of the steam coming out of a reactor as opposed to a boiler?
A reactor temperature? I can imagine it's about the same because the steam pressure and temperature and steam flow is what determines the size of the blades on your turbine. Yeah. So high pressure steam on a gearing or on a Fram is superheater outlet is 850 degrees. Pressure is about 600. Right. On a 1,200 pound plant, the pressure is 1,200, 1,275, and the temperature is 950, 925, something like that. But that's what governs the size of the blading, the thousands of blades on the turbine. So I would imagine it's about the same. I don't know though. I don't know. Yeah.
The shaft?
One destroyer,
Yeah.
about, what, 24 inch? 18 inch, 24.
Yeah.
They're hollow,
Yeah,
they're not
exact,
solid. Yeah, but it's a good point. The forward fire room, of course, has no propeller shafts through it because all that's behind it.
Yeah.
The forward engine room doesn't have a propeller shaft through it because right at its after bulkhead is the connection to the, but the two after planks, the forward fire room and the forward fire room has two shafts running through it. So that's why you have the same equipment in the after fire room as you have in the forward fire room, but the arrangement is different because in the after fire room you got to make way for those two shafts that are coming through. I'm sorry, the one shaft is coming through. So did that answer your question?
Yes, it does, thank you.
Yes, sir.
I was just gonna say, when you superheat the steam, then the temperature really goes up.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that's a very complex thing. The Navy, you guys who were Snipes aboard ships with an M-type boiler, the Frams, Fletcher's, Gearing's, Sumner, and the Cruiser, and all those guys, was a much more. I won't say it's better, but it was required more people, required more constant care, because when you get a bell from the bridge, go from 2/3 to standard speed, they're humping it down in the fire room, right? Because the engine room he's going to open that throttle, and some of you machinist mates, you're trying to pull that guy off the line. You're trying to do that. So he's opening the throttle, and then the guys in the engine room. The fire room, you better keep up with that. You got to keep up with temperature, pressure, and water level. You got to keep that water level, yeah. So I say machinist mates and BTs are like brothers who like to fight, but they're brothers who like to fight. Yes?
The amount of torque that you have on that shaft, how do they control, like if they want to go to flank speed?
Yeah.
Do they have to watch to make sure it doesn't go too?
It's not so much a torque problem. There's some.
You spin that throttle.
Yeah.
over
There's a number of myths, old wives' tales about shafts that will torque themselves. I have trouble with that because when you look at the size of a shaft, to take that shaft and twist it, torque it, it's pretty difficult. But no, you don't have to do that. When you get, if you got particularly when you've got the fire room fully manned like at general quarters, you got two Burnermen, one on the saturated side, one on the superheated side. You got so two Burnermen for each boiler. You got all the boilers on the line. You got the best checkmen up there checking water, and you just dare those machinist mates to pull you off the line. You can't do it. So you're right. You spin that throttle open
as fast as you can.
Yeah.
And the same thing, they also have a general quarters
Right.
drill usually, where you lock the shaft
Exactly.
at flank speed.
Well, that's a very difficult locking the shaft.
It is very difficult.
Yeah, in
but
order
you
to
can.
stop, you have to stop a shaft and lock it. In order to do that, on a multiple screw ship, you've got, the ship is still moving because the other engine room is still driving it ahead. And all of a sudden you've got a loss of lube oil or something like that. And you got to stop and lock that shaft. Well, that's where the machinist mate of the watch heads back, looking right down at the shaft, the turning of the shaft, and most of them are painted barber poles, so you can see the movement of it. And he's giving hand signals to the throttleman. You better have your best throttleman on there because he's giving hand signals to slow that shaft. You do not want it to rock the other way because if you've lost lube oil pressure, you don't have this coating of oil on that journal. And if you rock it back the other way, you wipe the bearing. So it's a very precise thing, and you practice it. Stop and lock the shaft is really, a number of times you would do that. If the fire room lost control of feed water, not going low is his worst casualty. Going high is your worst casualty because you're sending a slug of water toward the generators and the main engine. And if the fire room says, hey, water out of sight high, you better get that shaft stopped. Get it stopped. And the way you do that, if you do it fast, you're closing the head throttle at the same time you're opening that astern throttle. Yeah. A lot of people say, oh, you shouldn't do that. Well, no. The boiler doesn't care who's using the steam, head or astern. They don't care. So if you do it right, you can keep that boiler. Yes, Jim.
I was on the gearing, and all junior officers were required by the chief engineer to stand watches in main control.
Absolutely.
Because as a conning officer up on the bridge,
Yeah.
you could not go from all ahead standard to all back emergency without knowing what the hell's going on down below.
What are you asking them to do?
Damn straight.
Exactly. And your ship, my ship too, we cycled them all through.
Yeah.
Not just in the main control, we put them in the fire room too. Put them in the fire room too.
Stood them all.
Yeah. Now, modern day, you know, this is before the days of the PQS, personal qualification system, where you used to have to get qualifications and kind of locally produced. Nowadays, you have to do it in order to get your for an officer to get your surface warfare pin. You have got to go through all these. You know, they really tightened that up. Yeah.
The first destroyer I got on, the chief made anybody that came on board knew you had to draw every single steam line,
Yes.
low pressure,
Right.
high pressure,
Yeah.
all the valves.
Right. Yeah.
And you had to explain to them what everything was
Right.
for, from the inductors to you name it.
Absolutely. What Ed's talking about is what they call tracing a system. And basically what the chief does, or the first class does, hands you a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper. It says auxiliary exhaust system, be back by the end of the day. And you crawl through. And not only do you draw the piping and all the components of the system, but you draw every thermometer, every pressure gauge, every reducer, and it's a schematic. You have to create a schematic. And I have seen, when I was a midshipman, we had to do that. Midshipman, you know, you're bottom of the barrel. And I had to do it. I came back, I said, here it is, to some third class PT. Took it and said, wrong. After spending a day, crunch, 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 crunch. Do it again. I said, oh, Jesus. Anyway, yeah. But you're right, that's part of how you learn, part of how you learn. And it's surprising for those of you who think, well, there's so much involved in stuff like this. How do you ever learn it? You learn it quickly, but you learn it at a pace that allows you to learn it. And you start out as the gopher. You're getting coffee for the chief, right? And you're under instruction. You're going around. You're hourly, taking your hourly readings throughout the plant. You're learning which parts of the plant are which. You're learning, oh, I have to take that thermometer. What is that thermometer? Well, that goes with the second stage of the reduction gear. So, but yeah.
And like you say, when you were lighting off, and then all of a sudden you call BTs and say, send the steam.
Yeah.
You had to open up all the drain valves.
Absolutely, yeah.
And there was water pouring out of them originally.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because you, like you said, you didn't want it to go into.
Lighting off for a steam plant is a 24-hour job or more, depending on how complex your plant is. Every ship at one time was a steam-driven ship. I'm not disparaging the diesel-driven, the amphibs LSTs with diesel and all that. But every destroyer at one time was a steam-driven ship. And depending on the class of ship you were on, the plants were different, but the principle was all the same. But I just want to thank you very much but I just want to tell you, I have an absolute soft spot in my heart for Snipes. I was an A-gang, my first ship I was A-gang, when I had the fair weather machinist mates with they were great on the anchor windlass and all that. And on my second ship, I was the main propulsion assistant. I had M division and B division. My third ship, I was chief engineer. I had them all. After the chief engineer job, I went to Destroyer Squadron 5 as the squadron engineer for 7 destroyers. And then I went to New Zealand for 2 years, greatest 2 years in my entire career, where I was the damage control officer for the New Zealand Navy. So I've been a snipe all this time. So I have a real soft spot in my heart for snipes. I love all my shipmates, but I really, really love BTs and machinists.